what is part of this 45-day process? Is it multiple days of fasting throughout? Is it certain foods? What is the process like?
Well, it is a 45-day program, and there's no really long fasts in the book. I mean, they're no longer than a day and a half, but because it's meeting people where they are. So some people have been fasting, they're ready for the challenges. Some people are like, I'm a standard American diet person. I've been a couch potato for 30 years. I need help. So we can kind of meet all their needs. But I think it really speaks to the fact that we have to talk about lifestyle. We have to talk about, are you getting good sleep? Are you managing your stress? And that's not 5 minutes of meditation once a week. And how many of us think that check the box, that's what's done it. And it's really talking to people about anti-inflammatory nutrition. Unfortunately, most of the foods that proliferate in the processed food industry are highly inflammatory. And I'm talking about like gluten and dairy. I always get the side eye from people. They're like, no, not dairy. Sometimes in certain instances, sometimes grains, processed sugars, alcohol. Alcohol is a big one. Unfortunately.
Alcohol is really bad.
Yeah.
Especially if you're having it consistently. I don't know. I think Andrew Huberman just did a whole, breakdown, masterclass on alcohol for the brain and the body. And he was essentially like, there is no benefit.
Yeah.
There's only bad things that can come from that. Not even like, what about a little bit of wine every now and then and the resveratrol that's in the wine, but he's like, it doesn't outweigh the alcohol itself, having a little bit in that resveratrol or whatever. So I think I've never been drunk in my life or high. And I'll have maybe a Baileys on ice a couple times a year to sip on, but I'm like, I just feel like there is no added value.
Yeah.
Try to find something fast during that time, right? You'll get a lot more value for your body with that.
Well, and it's interesting because I feel like more and more people in the health and wellness space are either no longer drinking and never had problems with it, but just choose not to drink. And when I go to these events, like I was at an event in New York this past weekend, and most, if not all of us, don't drink. And so, I think it's a very personal decision. Mm-hmm. I know for women north of 40, all of a sudden, they get hot flashes. They don't, who makes good choices when you've had too much to drink? You're not going to make good choices personally or with nutrition because you're going to crave, the salty, sweet junk, and your body processes alcohol as a toxin. So, it's one of those things that I'm glad that more and more experts, and obviously Dr. Huberman is absolutely brilliant, and I'm so glad that he's using his platform to help educate people because I think we've been convinced otherwise for a long period of time.
Sure.
And certainly for me, being former ER nurse in inner city Baltimore and working with thousands and thousands of patients, like having those hard discussions about, does alcohol serve you? And I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, and I get it. There's people that they like their alcohol, they like their wine, they all these things. I get it. Their tequila, the shots, they like going to the bar and having fun. And I just think, it's kind of like with me with sugar. Like I love sugar, but I know it's not good for me. Mm. It doesn't do good things to my body. So I try to have days where I don't have any, and then I have some, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to enjoy this, but I know this is not benefiting me. This is not giving me any nutritional value. It's not helping my brain, my digestion, my heart, none of that. It might bring me some joy in the moment, right? Yes. Just like alcohol might for people, but you got to understand the risks. And obviously, just being in moderation is, the best thing. But I think, what do you think is worse, sugar or alcohol?
Oh. I think it depends on the susceptibility of the individual. I don't drink alcohol anymore, but I was always someone that didn't drink a whole lot. So that wasn't a problem. But I think processed sugars, because we start people so young. Think about what we do with children's birthday parties and every sporting event that, you're constantly doling out sugar. We get people addicted really early on. I would imagine that processed sugars are really in almost everything. And so I think that is a greater issue. But I would be remiss if I said, I personally have been impacted by alcoholism with a family member. And so for me, alcoholism holds a special spot in that I recognize a lot of people, and it's not just alcohol, it could be food addiction, it could be so many other things, that it's people have uncomfortable feelings that they aren't comfortable processing or acknowledging. And so that might be why they choose to,
numb it a little bit. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so no judgment.
Yeah,
I'm
of course.
completely sympathetic to all that. But I would say processed sugars for sure.
And what if someone's never fasted before? What do they need to understand as a as a potential effects that will happen with fasting, whether it be 16 hours, 24 hours, or 2 days? What do people need to know before they do their first fast?
Yeah, I mean, I usually have kind of a graduated perspective. Like, first you stop snacking. Like, it really is that
Right.
simple. So if someone is, really starting from a place where they've been eating a standard American diet, they're not physically active, I'm like, we need to teach you to stop snacking, because I promise you're not going to get hungry in between, because we're going to teach you how to balance your macros. So you're going to have more protein with your meal so that you can get from breakfast to lunch and dinner. And you're going to eventually get to a position where you can go from dinner to breakfast. Now that freaks everyone out.
Without having chips at night or something.
Correct. And
So it's so challenging when you're so used to it. You have dinner and you just want to have a couple, some chips or something, a cookie or whatever it is before you go to bed.
Yeah, and I think you have to replace that habit with something else.
Like tea.
Right. Even if I have a lot of people that have herbal tea at nighttime, they take a walk with their dogs, they call, a friend, maybe they've got a friend who's fasting with them. So it starts with no snacking, restructuring those macros, and then really the next step is going from dinner to breakfast.
Right, just dinner, and that's it,
right,
and then
right.
breakfast.
But I think it's you have to kind of get yourself out of that headspace. Like, think very clearly about, why are you choosing to fast? Is it because you want to get healthier? I can't tell you how many people I meet who were like, I was told I had prediabetes. That was a powerful impetus to shake things up.
Sure.
Or, I've got young children at home, or I've got a loved one I have to take care of. And so all of a sudden, people's priorities shift. It's like, I have to take care of me because other people depend on me. So getting very clear about your intentions, because that's what you're going to need to reflect on when you are considering what the options will be. So for a lot of people, that evening snacking, and I think the last 2.5 years in particular, people have just been stressed and they don't know how to deal with the stress. And so stress eating has really become a huge issue. But I always remind people that we become less insulin sensitive as the day goes on. So you would be better off having an early breakfast than eating late at night. That 3-hour window before bed is really important. And so understanding
to not eat at night. Yeah.
Right. That insulin sensitivity is lowered at nighttime. And so, that late night eating can really derail, even if you're doing all the right things. So when someone's new to fasting, those are usually the first 3 things that we talk about. And then I say, listen, baby steps. We go from 12 hours to 12 and a half. If you need a break, we do that. Then we go to 13. And so really saying to people, like, you are eventually going to get to a point, but also explaining to them that if you are primarily using glucose as your primary fuel source, it's going to take you longer to become fat adapted to where your body's, your insulin levels are low enough that can go in and free up these fatty acids to fuel the body. And so saying it could take 4, 6, 8 weeks for that to happen, depending on how metabolically flexible someone is. I mean, some people are like a duck to water. It's 2 weeks, easy, no big deal. But more often than not, that's not the case. And just helping people understand that everyone's an individual. Some people, it's, you take 2 steps forward and 4 back. It's all okay. It's part of the process. We want this to be sustainable.
Yes.
And there's no benefit to white knuckling it with fasting. Like, some people white knuckle everything they do, and I'm like, that is not the way to live.
No, it's not.
And
it's not sustainable.
No.
What's the lifestyle approach you have now after these last few years of testing it and trying it and having case studies of other women? How do you live your life moving forward personally?
Yeah.
Is it a fasting once a week? Is it every other day? What's your style?
Yeah, I would say I'm very intuitive. So depending on, how hungry am I? Did I lift that day? What was my sleep like? Did my Oura Ring bark at me and tell me my sleep scores in the toilet? Maybe that's not the day to push the fasting envelope and push, doing a heavy workout. So I tend to really listen to my body, but the consistent things are, I don't eat after 6 o'clock at night, ideally.
Really?
I do much better having an earlier feeding window. That works for me. It might not work for someone else. I really focus in on sleep. I eat a lot of protein. I always say I'm carnivore-ish. I like vegetables. I do eat carbs, but I carb cycle. And that's worked really well for me. I don't drink alcohol, and there's no judgment for those that do. I just know it was the only thing that gave me hot flashes and messed up my sleep. And my sleep, like, on the hierarchy of importance, sleep is so high up there that to me, I'm like, it's not worth it to have a martini every 6 months. It just isn't.
Sure.
So for
what
me...
What about sugar? What's your sugar intake like?
I'll be honest with you, my vice in life is dark chocolate.
Right.
That's my only, but that's really like the one thing. And so I have a little bit of dark chocolate every day, but most of the time it's sweetened with stevia. And, I don't have it on today, but I usually wear a continuous glucose monitor kind of episodically. And so for me, it's like that's my one vice. Like I don't eat dairy, I don't eat grains, I don't eat gluten, and I haven't for a long time.
No bread, no cereals, no pastries.
No, I don't, and I don't really love that stuff. But my dark chocolate is my thing.
I wish I had that disease where I didn't love bread and pastries.
Yeah. No, but I think for me, it's like you mentioned, the cost benefit. I don't feel good when I eat those things. Of course. And I put an autoimmune disease into remission when I went gluten-free.
So you had an autoimmune disease?
I did. I had two. And
really?
so, yeah. And so once you get leaky gut, that kind of opens up that. It's like once you have one, you're more prone to others. And for me, I was like, I have to get myself together. And so for 11 years, I've been gluten-free.
Wow. So you eliminated certain foods. We're like, let's try this. Yep. And then it started to heal.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, why go back on now?
Right. Yeah. And so for me, it's funny, like on vacation, will people say, oh, we have gluten-free bread. Might I have a piece of gluten-free bread? But I also recognize it sets up that, I get that dopamine hit. I'm like, I want more.
Let's get more.
Exactly.
And it's so hard to have one.
Yeah, and that's why, and so my kind of mindset now is, it used to be moderation, not deprivation. But if you can't moderate, you eliminate. And so that's kind of how I think. Like each one of us has to decide.
I know. I don't have moderation in me.
Yeah.
It's either all in or all out.
Right. But you recognize that about yourself. That's really what's so important.
It's so challenging. I would love to get to the point where I can be like, okay, once or twice a week I can have a small like taste of ice cream, not like a whole bucket of ice cream or something, But it's like once you have a little bit, it's so hard to trick your brain that you don't desire this so much.
Well, you get that
putting the drug on your tongue. And it just rushes your whole body.
Yeah, it's quesomorphine. So it's actually, and it's interesting, even Peter Attia loves ice cream.
Yeah.
So my husband actually came home one day and said, I was listening to Peter Attia, and even he has a weakness for ice cream. He said, so I don't feel quite so bad about myself.
Yeah.
But ice cream in our house, not that I eat it, but like that is their crack.
Of course, yeah. Is there an ice cream that you could eat that's good for you, like a protein ice cream that has no sugar or something?
I'm sure you could probably make it. I mean,
you probably wouldn't taste
the
same, but
Yeah, I just try to get them like Aldine's, which is this organic ice cream, and then I feel like, okay, and I'm like, listen, guys, when the half gallon is gone, it's gone. And so the teenagers will sneak downstairs and they'll eat it. I mean, they'll literally just eat it out of the carton, and they'll do it to one another so that the one teenager will try to eat it so the other one can't eat it. Then my husband has
the teenage days when I had eight Dr. Peppers a day in the summer and, just ice cream all night.
Yeah, and they're impervious. Like my 17-year-old, 6 feet tall. And
the six-pack. And
he's ridiculous. Plays football and he can eat anything he wants.
That's crazy. So you're kind of like an intuitive person right now. You'll fast. Are you doing intermittent fasting every other day, or how does that work?
I do. I would say I fast most days. So it could be 14, it could be 18 hours. I can tell you when I came out from the East Coast, we had a 90-minute ground delay in Denver. And so when I got to the hotel, I remember saying to my husband, I was like, normally I wouldn't eat this much food this late in the day, but I'm like, I ordered a double burger, I ordered hard-boiled eggs, and I just ate this massive meal. So for me, I think a lot of it is based on like what's going on with my schedule. I fast every day, but sometimes I fast only 12 or 13 hours. It really depends on what's going on.
And then you focus on the protein intake. How do I get my protein in?
Yep.
And usually when you eat enough protein, you don't feel as hungry.
Correct.
That's the thing. When we have carbs, we need more carbs.
Right. And so I always say when you break your fast, protein and healthy fats or protein and carbs. It's never carbs naked. I use the term, naked carbs, meaning you don't just sit down and eat a bowl of chips. You want to have a steak or a piece of chicken or a piece of fish or some egg.
And you can have some carbs with that.
Correct.
But eat the meat or the protein first.
Yep.
So that's the first thing we should do once we break the fast, whether it's 14 hours or 24 hours, is have protein first. Right.
And I think the other thing is that some people, and I'm certainly guilty of this, if I do a longer fast, the longer the fast, the lighter the meal when you break your fast. Mm-hmm. So when I used to do longer fasts, I would have bone broth because if I sat down and ate a meal, my stomach was like, no.
Like a 4 or 5 day fast.
Right. Yeah. I had to have very light meals. It might be a salad, soup. And there are people that are definitely more sensitive to when they break their fast. So I always say if you get digestive distress or you don't feel good, lighter meal, break it with something light, and then eat a more substantial meal later.
What's the worst foods to eat after you fast?
I would say, just sitting down and eating a bunch of processed carbs, like don't sit down and have a bowl of ice cream. You know, you're going to spike your blood sugar, spike your insulin. I would say the processed carbs, you know, if you sat down and had some rice and had some chicken, I mean, that would be fine. But I would say, you know, most of the processed foods, because your appetite and satiety cues are not going to be clicked in. You know, and I'm sure you probably have had experts that have talked about this, but the bliss point, you know, the processed food industry hijacks your brain chemistry so you don't realize, you know, you can eat 2 bags of Cheetos and you don't feel it.
No, you don't. It's crazy.
Right. And it's designed to be that way.
Oh, they taste so good.
Yeah. So I think we oftentimes don't talk enough about being personally fulfilled, being emotionally fulfilled, you know, being with the person that makes you feel safe and makes you feel appreciated and valued. And so, you know, if you don't have that person right now, that person is out there. I'm here to say, I mean, I got married in my 30s, and I remember thinking, you know, it wasn't going to happen because how many times had I been maid of honor in weddings? And I was like, it's not going to happen. And then I met him, and I was like, oh, I understand why I had to wait.